this topic, are auditors walking the talk when it comes to implementing change? We landed on this topic as a result of a couple of things, some of which started with some productivity research on CAAT's usage, computer-assisted audit techniques. And then we started thinking about, gee, you know, auditors make recommendations and they have corrective actions that they would like management to take to enhance the risk management in a firm. But now what happens when auditors have to change? You know, we're so used to making the recommendations, and we expect others to make the change, but how effective are we when we have to, you know, manage change that might affect our methodology? So today's agenda is basically that we're going to do a couple of things. First, we will talk about the role of change management in audit. We'll define those terms. We'll also talk about what some of the barriers are to change. I do want to share with everyone a 5-step model for organizational change so that we can look at it and we can say to ourselves, gee, if we're expecting auditors in the department to make a change, how long should it take for that change to become a sustained change and part of the way we do things? I think secondarily, the model is helpful in anticipating, gee, how long will it take management also to absorb the change? So I do think participating in this webinar, you can participate on a couple of levels, thinking about the audit department, but also thinking about, gee, how can I apply these concepts and these techniques to our clients? We will focus on how to make change happen. We'll talk about it specifically for expanding the use of CAAT, computer-assisted auditing tools. But truly, these same techniques could be applied to any type of change. I will share with you the typical reactions from the point of view of an individual to change. And throughout this model, and this webinar rather, we will be using CAAT and data analytics as the recurring example. We got to that because CAAT has been a high priority for survey participants, KnowledgeLeader survey participants now for about 10 years. We've also got 5 polling questions for you. So if you're interested in the CPE, you do need to provide some answers. And if this is your first webinar with me, please feel free to use the chat box and share your comments and share your questions. So with that, let's take a look at why we pick CAAT, why we pick the topic. Well, as I started to mention, it has been popular in the surveys, and it's been something that's been a priority in most audit departments for about 10 years. And it really gives us an opportunity to optimize audit coverage while minimizing audit risk. For those of you, I think that's a known benefit. I also think these days it's probably the competency that most auditors want to have. And I think in general, just using the tools, it makes a lot of sense because it provides value to the organization. So what I would like to do, I really would like to get a feel for you and for your use of CAAT. So I have a polling question that I would like you to answer. And so no right or wrong answers, just have you used a data analysis tool to conduct audits in the past? Yes, no, or does not apply. So if you just kind of, give your answers there, and let's see what your experience has been. So I am looking to see, Laura, can you see what the response has been?
Yes, I can, and people are still submitting answers, so we'll go ahead and give them a few seconds. It looks like now about 95% of the attendees have answered, so we can go ahead and close it out.
Okay, so we'll go take a look at, you know, when I was putting this slide together, we can see it's overwhelmingly yes. When I put this slide together, I just out of knee-jerk habit added does not apply, and I really was wondering who would answer the does not apply. So that's going to be a perennial question in the back of my mind. We did have about a 94% response rate. If you haven't used CAAT yet, and that's about 20%, 21% of the audience, you might want to do one of two things with the rest of this webinar. You might want to focus on the change aspect of this webinar, meaning how do we affect change, or you might want to use this as an opportunity to explore CAATs a little bit more. So let's keep going. Let's keep going. You know, if you're on the fence about using CAAT, if you're on the fence, there's one more reason to use them. And I don't know if you are a card-carrying IIA member as I am, but you can see that there's a standard, 1210.A3, that auditors must have sufficient knowledge of key information. And we highlighted the, must have sufficient knowledge and, about not only the technology risks and controls, but also about available technology-based auditing techniques. So I think it's inherently interesting to learn more about CAATs, but I think it's also a necessary thing because the technology is changing, more and more data is available electronically. So I think at this stage, I think we focused on establishing the reasons for using CAATs, and now what I would like to do is focus our attention on change. And so what I'd like you to do is answer this polling question. Again, no wrong answers. How do you define change? Do you define it as a deviation from the standard? Do you define it as the act of becoming different? Do you define it as an action that triggers improvement or detriment? Is it, in your mind, all of the above or, none of the above? I don't think any of those answers really work. So we'll just give you an opportunity to give your answers. And Locke, I'll let you monitor that response there. And see if we've had, what percentage have answered the?
About 90% have, so I think we can go ahead and show everybody the results.
Okie dokie, let's see what that is. Let's see what we've got. And I didn't see those answers. Did you see the answers?
We'll go ahead and keep it open for everybody, so you can go ahead and submit it again if you didn't have a chance.
Yeah.
So go ahead and leave it open. If people are did have a little bit of a problem, so we'll let people submit again. You didn't have that chance.
I'm having trouble seeing the responses to the poll. For some reason, I'm not seeing the responses to the poll. I'm tempted to just continue with what the answer should have been.
Yep. So if you want to hear the poll results should come up now.
Okay.
It looks like 68% said all of the above.
Which is a great thing. That's a great thing, because that is the best answer of the answers that were there. The none of the above really does not apply. But depending on one's perspective, one could define change in some other ways. But we're really talking about anything that is creating something different. Hopefully, it'll be for the positive, but sometimes, there's all different types of change. We're going to talk about the model in a minute. I just wanted, for the 20% that have not yet used any computer-assisted auditing techniques, I did want to also include a definition of data analytics. And I figured that I would stay with the IIA definition, and that is, it's the process of identifying, gathering, validating, analyzing, and interpreting various forms of data within an organization to further the purpose and mission of internal auditing. So, frankly, just looking at it as any slicing, any dicing that we're doing, that's equivalent to the term data analytics. And while we're defining things, I think we should probably also define some roles in the change process. And so what we've got are 5 distinct roles. One role is the stakeholder role. And by definition, these are the folks that have skin in the game. These are also folks who, at a senior level, will be affected by the change itself. The stakeholders may also be process owners. What I'm getting at here is these might be the folks that are responsible for the process that you are auditing, or you are trying to help them change. If we look at the definition of a champion, a stakeholder may be a champion, but more likely the champion is usually an executive. And look at the champion role as a sponsorship role. And I will just tell you that unless you have a champion, it's difficult to make sustained change happen, because the rate of change in organizations is so rapid that for most people, a change initiative starts to look like, flavor of the month. And it's the champion that really helps everyone stay focused. Decision makers, I think we're all clear on what a decision maker is. This is usually the person that holds the purse strings as well. These are the people who determine the product that we're going to use, or the software that we're going to use, or just in general, they're approving the recommendation. Influencers are the unsung members of this cast of roles in the change process. These are the people who do their best work behind the scenes. These are the people that the decision makers listen to. Sometimes your decision maker will actually almost delegate the decision. Nominally, the decision maker will make the decision, but really they're relying on the influencers and the influencers' opinions. So I would pay attention to who the key influencers are in your organization when you're trying to influence the use of CAAT within your audit methodology. And users, I think we're all familiar with this term. These are the folks who will have to work with the tool. These are folks who might also be tasked with implementing the CAAT and actually using it. Typically, the users report to the stakeholders. The stakeholders are the ones whose neck are on the line to make sure that things work the way it should. So now that we know what the roles are, what I would like to do is walk through the change model and take you through the 5 steps in it. And the first step is creating a vision of how things can be done. And what we're going to do is we're going to take each of the 5 steps one by one and talk about them within the context of, okay, how do we get CAATs accepted, or if you're already using CAATs within the department, how do we promote the use of CAATs within the department? Frankly, sustained successful change does not occur by accident. It follows a process. So if you've ever tried to make something happen or get something adopted and it's not gone so well, it's probably because one of these steps was either skipped or maybe was not done as completely as possible. So we're going to take a look at each step, beginning with the first step, which is having a vision and creating a vision of how things could be done, better. Now, a vision by definition is really much more than just an activity or a task. I mean, it literally could take years to accomplish a vision. For example, if I wanted to be at the helm of a quality producing, active, relevant business partner, trusted advisor to management, if that was my vision for my audit department, that's not something that I'm going to accomplish in a week, a month, or even a year. And I would also argue that to achieve that vision would require continual and continued initiatives. We would accomplish one thing, and then we'd have to do something else to achieve that vision. So what I'd like to know, and if you would use the chat box to answer the question, what is your organization's vision concerning the use of CAAT? And what's your understanding of what your department is looking to achieve? And if you don't know, well, then just write that you don't know. But if your audit department were to optimize its CAAT use, and now I'm assuming that you are using it, how would you measure or evidence that you achieved this goal? So you might need a couple of minutes to think about that answer. But do share it with the rest of us. Use the chat box. And while you're sharing your responses, Lark, I'm going to let you monitor that. And what I'm going to do while folks are responding, I am going to move on to the second step in this process. Because once we have a vision, we really do need to translate it into agendas. By definition, I just mentioned that a vision is something that cannot be achieved in a week, a month, a year. I mean, it's a multi-year thing. It could be a continued process. So what we need to do from a leadership perspective, or if you're the person that wants to promote the use of CAATs, you have to be able to say, okay, how am I going to chunk this into measurable, achievable, manageable projects that people can act on? Because if I can't get it into those manageable, actionable chunks, the change is not going to happen. So it starts with having the vision, and then it becomes a question of, gee, is everything that we're doing, or all of the activities and the projects moving in that direction? So if we're going to introduce CAATs, what are some of the things that we need to think about, and what are some of the things that we're going to need to be involved in? Similarly, as part of this second step, as we're chunking it, as I call it, getting it into these agendas or these manageable projects, we definitely need to specify time frames. When do we want certain things to be done? So, for example, if you were new to using CAAT, maybe you want to start off with something really fundamental like Excel and Access. But then I think you need to ask yourself, well, how well are people using Access and Excel in our department today? Who are our power users? Do we have any? And that might be one manageable action that we get those folks up to speed. So as we're taking our vision and we are breaking it into pieces, what we really need to do is make sure that we've gotten at a level where these agendas are understandable to folks, that people can see the agenda items as projects that they can participate in and that they can work on to accomplish at least a piece of the vision. And in this case, since we're talking about CAATs, moving CAATs usage or expanding the use of CAATs even more in the organization. Part of this might even be asking yourself, well, gee, to what extent do we need to prepare our auditees for our use of CAATs and get them to understand where it is that we're going with this? So the second step is a very practical step, and once we've landed on the agendas, the next important thing that needs to happen is the third step, which is communicate. And communicate in such a way that the value proposition, the benefit of what it is that we are looking to do really resonates. And with change, you need to think about the benefit resonating with those folks, the shareholders, the stakeholders, the users, the decision makers, the influencers, and the champion. You know, I don't know if you think about it, but I think about it a lot. Why do ads work? Why does advertising work? And ads work because it's the spaced repetition. The ads are on frequently enough that you begin to remember the message. And also, if you think about effective ads address a need. Effective ads, they're scratch an itch. And that's what we really need to do. We need to come up with a message that answers the question, what's in it for me? Why should I use CAATs? Why should I make a change? Why should we as a department make this investment? And then figure out ways to answer that question, get that message out there, and repeat the message. Don't just think that you need to say it once. I also think that as part of the communication, you should let people know what the criteria is for success. You know, basically, how will we know when we've been successful? One of the things that's very motivating is giving people a sense of achievement. So when people feel that they can do new things, when they feel that they've mastered something, they're very motivated, they feel good. So as part of step 3, make sure that you've communicated what good looks like. You know, it's interesting, one of the things that started this topic off was, as I told you earlier, some of your survey responses. If you're a KnowledgeLeader subscriber and you answered the survey, I don't know if you realize that CAAT has been within the top 10 of important priorities for audit departments for 10 years. That's a very long time for something to stay at the top of a priority list. Now, initially, when Lark shared that information with me, I think, truthfully, my first reaction was, really? 10 years? Nothing's been done in 10 years. Then I started to realize, no, that's not true. In fact, probably quite the opposite is true. When you throw your minds back and you consider how much technology has changed over the past 10 years, this whole idea of CAATs, it's really a moving target. I think, and because it's a moving target, that explains why this has been in the top 10 for 10 years. The technology is changing continually. More and more data is available electronically. And so it's really something that if you haven't adopted it within your department, I think you really need to take a very, very hard look. And now I need to bring up something that is a little sensitive, but I'm not going to shy away from doing that. I think we need to pause and think for a moment about what if I'm the person, and this is rhetorical, by the way. If you're sitting in a room with some coworkers, you might not want to have this as a conversation point, but I think we have to ask ourselves and look in our hearts and say, gee, are we really the block to moving things forward? And you know, do I really, am I kind of resistant to adopting change? And I think that maybe we're all motivated. Maybe it's somebody else that's not motivated. Maybe it's, you know, it's a decision maker that's a little bit on the fence. I think that there are some things that we need to, or some changes we need to make. And one is that in audit we have to feed two masters. One master is doing the best job possible with the audit, and that might require time. And then the other master is getting the audits done so we can complete the plan. And those two masters sometimes are at odds. You know, obviously we want the best of both worlds. We want quality audits and we want it done within a certain amount of time. I think when we start thinking about making a change, as in using CAAT, we hit a little bump in the road. And that bump in the road is whenever you learn new software, you learn a new approach, that takes time. And that's going to slow down the audit. So I think that one of the things we need to do to embrace CAAT is to really think strategically and long-term. At the same time, we're trying to get the audits done. And we make sure that we do allocate that learning curve time because it will benefit us all in the long run. So let's focus on how we can promote change. How can we get others to want to make change happen? And there's a couple of things that we need to do. I think the most important thing is figure out where the folks who need to change, figure out where they are either the most concerned, dare I use the term, afraid, hesitant. What do they feel they are going to lose? How do they feel threatened by the change? Now, I'm using some strong words. I mean, we all know real auditors do not feel afraid. Real auditors do not feel threatened, but use your imagination. What is holding a person back from adopting CAAT's usage? And understand that. I would also make sure that we don't let other initiatives eclipse the priority of CAAT's usage. So I do think that we need to get the right people involved early. There are certain folks in every department who are influential, and and they also are almost like innate teachers. You know, they're innate enablers in a positive way. We need to get these folks involved so that they can help share the positive message with others. And I think most of all, we need to make sure that we share and create a very positive atmosphere so that when people do make mistakes, they don't feel threatened by it. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to get your opinion on this next polling question. It's our third polling question. And true or false, to affect positive change in your organization, only the CAE has to be convinced of its importance. So what do you think? True or false? Only the CAE has to be convinced of its importance.
And while people are submitting a question or their answers to this question, I just wanted to let you know that there was a variety of responses to the CAAT question you had asked earlier. Ranges from, you know, it's important to get the CIO involved to not sure. So, and some people are still submitting, submitting their answers through the chat function to that particular question you answered or you asked in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the reason I put that question so early on in this conversation is because if we're unclear or if we are not concerted in our answer, meaning our answer is so varied not unified, that I think will impede our change management efforts. And so maybe one takeaway from this webinar is for folks to go back to their organizations and say, hey, you know, I'm not really sure what our vision is. Do we have a vision for this? Because that, answering that alone, at least it gives you a target to start to shoot for. That might be the starting point. Let's continue to monitor those answers as they come in, Lark.
Okay.
Meanwhile, how do we look at with the survey for the true and false answers? Do we look like we got enough of a response?
We do. It looks like a little over 90% said false. So the results are up on the screen now.
Okay. Yeah, that's good because that's great. That is actually the brilliant answer. So we have, I can tell we have experienced folks in the area of change management out there. You know, I think it's real easy for folks to, and I'm going to use a strong word, blame leadership for, you know, and I will say that in some cases leadership is to blame, so it's not unusual, but to solely put everything on the CAE's shoulders is absolutely patently false. We need to get people at all levels involved. From my perspective, as a consultant who works with a lot of change initiatives, this fourth step, in my view, is the most important one. I know I said that having a vision is important. To me, having a vision is just the table stakes. I mean, if you don't have a vision, we're not going anywhere with the model. But this fourth step is huge. If people feel that when they make a mistake, I hesitated because I was about to say if they make a mistake. It's not if. When they make a mistake. You know, when they, quote, unquote, struggle with a query, or they can't get a filter to work, or they request the data, they don't get the right data back, or they don't analyze the results correctly. You know, they make wrong conclusions. If the response from their coworkers, peers, management is castigating, is punishing, or makes them feel foolish, they will never try again. So this fourth step is hugely important. I think also it's at a certain point we can feel that, oh, people are just coming up with excuses. They really don't want to use CAATs. That's why they're saying this didn't work, that didn't work. But sometimes it's not an excuse. They're really having a problem. And we need to stay, we really need to stay open-minded. I think this is also, at this point in the change model, we as auditors should look to be change agents. And so what I wanted to share with you were the behaviors of change agents. And change agents, by definition, promote and foment change. They actually help people change their behaviors and move in the right direction rather. So I do think that we need to develop that competency in ourselves. And then, very importantly, finally, the last step in the model is to just stay the course. You know, persist and don't give up. You know, keep tweaking the process, keep tweaking the tools. You know, some of my clients have purchased tools that are very sophisticated, very, very sophisticated, and maybe too sophisticated. You know, they require a level of technical expertise that is slightly out of the grasp of most of the people in the department. Now, while there is an expense incurred, I think it's a brave person and a smart person who will say, you know what, maybe we made the wrong decision, and you know, maybe we have to find something. Else. I also think that we need to be brave in confronting behavior that's not where we want it to be. If you see certain teams not using CAATs at all, I think we need to reach out and ask, you know, why? Why aren't we where we thought we would be with using CAATs? One of the things that I also think is important is to really take a hard look at how are we going to recognize those folks who are getting the types of results that we desire. Recognition is also very motivating. Look at the folks who are having success with CAATs. What are they doing? What are they doing differently from other folks? Why is it that they're able to succeed where the other folks are struggling? In essence, profile the folks who are doing really well and then share the results of that with the rest of the people in the department. I also think it's important to talk with folks whose behavior and performance is not where we want it to be, and take a hard look at that. And then finally, I think we have to look at who we are recruiting in the future. Now that we know, maybe we need people with certain backgrounds, or maybe we need people with a different profile, different type of experience. And this might affect who we are recruiting, who we're bringing on board. It might also affect how we collect information. Because if we are now embracing CAATs in our methodology, then all of us need to be more data focused, and we need to ask more questions about data layouts. Where is the data residing? Whose data is it? As part of the planning process, and these might be new behaviors that we've not been used to doing before. So we've covered the 5 steps in the organizational change model, and starting with a vision, and translating into agendas, communicating, having a problem-solving attitude, a forgiving yet problem-solving attitude, and persisting. Now I think we just need to spend a couple of moments on how individuals deal with change. And basically, it's a bumpy road for most individuals. It doesn't matter whether the change is my dry cleaner has moved, to I'm working on a new team, or there's been a reorganization. In order for individuals to successfully embrace change, they have to let go of the old reality. So if you think about the folks in your department, and if you happen to be in a smaller department where the department might just be you, maybe you and another person, I think you really need to think through, okay, well, who are the individuals that are holding up the change initiative at this stage? What is it that they are looking at? What is it that they don't want to lose that we need to address? When we deal with change as individuals now, and not as an organization, a collection of individuals, it's definitely like the reaction to death and dying, if anyone has looked at the works of Kubler-Ross. First thing is denial. We don't need to change. We don't need to use CAATs in this department. We're doing very well without it. Where our auditees are happy. We're getting reports. We're getting our reports out. We're getting our audits done. There's no need. There's really not a lot of data that we audit that's electronic. By the way, everything that I am saying now, this would be behavioral evidence that an individual is in denial. Another reaction to change from an individual perspective is blame. They're blaming others. Well, we have to do this because the head of the department said we have to do it. I think it's ridiculous, but the head said we have to do it. That's an example of how blame would manifest itself coming out of an individual, just in ordinary conversation. Sometimes people get angry. They get really, really frustrated and really, really angry. I could have gotten this audit done, they might say. I could have gotten this audit done so much quicker, but I got really bogged down because of these CAATs that they're requiring that I spend time using. Ultimately, what we are looking for is acceptance. But if you notice in the diagram, it is a bumpy road. You might even notice that the diagram takes a little quick bump up, with happiness is that second step. I just need to warn you that generally that happiness is unfounded optimism. And you'll notice shortly thereafter it's not sustained. And it really needs to be managed, because once a person starts to go down that hill towards depression, it's sometimes hard to turn them around. I'm particularly pointing that out in case some of you are in departments that have been wrestling with CAAT's usage now for some time. There might be some constituents in the audit department that are thinking, well, here we go again. We've been trying to tackle this for years without getting any traction. And they might seem a little bit down about it, but that too can be managed. Earlier, I mentioned that it's important to address the potential feelings of loss, fear, where are people threatened. I think it's important to get benefit-oriented statements out there. And earlier I said, and I'm repeating it, we need to communicate messages that answer the question, what's in it for me, the user? Why should I make a change? I got my life down to a dull roar. I have figured out how to plan and execute these audits within the timeline. I've got my life in harmony. You're throwing a monkey wrench into things. And I wanted to include some of the benefits of CAAT that could be used as a springboard for coming up with individual benefits. So we know that CAATs can be used for continuous monitoring on the audit side. It can also be used for continuous monitoring on the business side, depending on the nature of what you're doing with the query and what the data and the scenario is. We know that it's helpful when planning audits to give you some insight concerning what's in that population, where are the outliers. So that's useful. And we do know that when the development is sound, it does reduce human error in drawing conclusions. So these are some of the practical benefits. Now what I'm recommending is we now take this and leverage this into what are the individual benefits. I think some of the key individual benefits are marketability. I know some of you are probably cringing. You're probably thinking, hey, aren't we supposed to be retaining people? Why are you talking about giving a person a marketable skill? And I'm saying, yeah, by giving them that marketable skill, you really will be retaining them because they'll feel like they're achieving in their learning. I also think that by using CAATs, we reduce and limit the amount of arguments that we have with the people that we're auditing. Because we're now able to look at a full population, it's no longer we're talking about, well, we've got 5 out of 20 that were wrong. We're now able to say we've got 5 out of the total population, which definitely reduces conflict and changes things up. So I think I see that as another benefit. So it's at this point I've been giving you a lot of different techniques about change, about organizations and individuals, but I think it's now time for you to give you a little chance to display what we've been talking about. So I've got a poll question here, and it's imagine this situation. Imagine that your department has invested in ABC software with the goal of using it for data analytics during audit. You, as one of the department's senior managers, are trying to encourage and coach your team members to use it for the first time. Your team members are reluctant to accept it and have come up with some very imaginative excuses to avoid attending the training. What's the best way for you to respond? Should you schedule an after-hours training session so that their work days are undisturbed, threaten to write them up, ignore the situation, and coach them as they use the CAAT, or listen to and address their concerns and provide as much information as possible? So think about what your answer is and make that selection. Look, while they're putting their answers in, did you get any other insights into the vision of CAATs in some of their organizations?
Yes, and responses are still coming in. It's amazing. So, you know, some people are asking, they're commenting that, you know, they don't know, like I mentioned earlier, and then some people are saying that to ease the use of CAATs, the ease of use of CAATs has failed to make life easier for users, and this is someone's comment. They said that they think it's a component of the 10 years of CAATs as a top 10 internal audit consideration. So I think this person is seeing what the market saw within the benchmarking study you referenced earlier, where it's been a long trend people have been trying to deal with and trying to get their arms around. And then others have said, you know, when they worked with larger audit firms, they used CAAT's tools for all their audits, and you just had to be trained on how to use it. Smaller firms don't seem to use it as much.
Which I think is understandable. You know, for some of the smaller firms, first of all, depending on culturally the role of audit within the firm and the nature of the industry, cost can be a barrier. You know, it can be a barrier, but that still, you know, what's the expression? No problem can resist, you know, the sustained assault of thinking about it. So if we keep working on it and keep identifying, well, where is the barrier really coming from, we can come up with ways to overcome it. But clearly it is easier, I think, for some of the larger firms. Should we close the poll, do you think?
Yes, let's go ahead and do that. And it looks like the results should be up on the screen now for you and everybody to see.
Yeah, let's look and see. What does that look like to you? Yeah,
it's like 95, almost 95% of the people answered they selected the last option. So listen to and address their concerns.
Which is definitely the best way, the best way to go. Definitely the best way to go. It's interesting, that first option, scheduling an after-hours training session so that their work days are undisturbed. I mean, no good deed goes unpunished. After hours, how many people are going to want to just jump up and down and, let me stay longer than I'm already staying long, I'll just stay longer. That option could actually increase the resistance. And clearly, the threatening to write them up, I mean, it's archaic. You know, it would definitely be perceived as a form of punishment. Ignoring the situation, though, for some is attractive. You know, maybe if I ignore it, it'll go away. Maybe if I ignore their passive-aggressive behavior concerning the training and coach them, some people might have picked that. But truly, as the majority selected, listening to them and addressing their concerns and providing as much information as possible would be the most consistent behaviors with the change model that we've been talking about. So that's definitely the best way to go. Let's look at one more polling scenario, and in this situation, your department has I'm so sorry, just kind of lost my place there. Your department has been unsuccessful in its efforts to implement computer-assisted auditing. And you know that management spent considerable time and money to license a software package that only a few in the department use. Several colleagues are so disenchanted that they're updating their resumes. Based on your new knowledge of change management practices, what would you advise management to do? That's the question. What would you advise management to do? And let me give you your choices. Your choices are to identify the root cause of the slow adoption, mandate the software is used by a certain deadline, poll the department, asking what individuals think should be done, and go with what the majority suggests, or give the department more time. So I see we're getting some responses to the survey. And I don't know if there are any questions or comments that we should address while we're getting these responses. And I see we've got like almost 86% of people responding. And it looks like, I'm going to close this poll. And it looks like we've got about 80% of the audience with the right answer, which is identify the root cause of the slow adoption. And this goes back to really understanding what the hurdles are so that we can then, address them. And that would be the best answer. Now, I have to say, from a practical perspective, mandate the software's use by a certain deadline has been done in several departments, and it has worked. Now, it has worked, however, not without some dissonance and not without some bumps in the road. But that is an option. It's definitely a different managerial style. The C, while it sounds very participatory, poll the department, and it sounds like, isn't that great, we'll all, hug each other and sing Kumbaya. Quite frankly, that's susceptible to groupthink and not really advisable. And quite frankly, giving the department more time, they've already had time. The classic definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different answer. So that really would not be the direction to go. So the best approach is to really take a look at the root cause and figure out, well, what is it? Is it that people need training? Is it that they need more practice time? Is it that we need to change up the profile of the people that we're hiring? Do we need to more clearly define, our methodology, how we want people to use CAATs in the planning, how we want people to use CAATs in the testing phase? Do we need to centralize CAATs usage, meaning do we need to appoint a couple of people who will be the maintainers, that they'll be the ones that will develop the queries and share them with the rest of the class? So if we need development, do we come to those specialists? That last option, if you're in a smaller department, is a bit of a challenge because you don't really have, quote unquote, extra people to go around. So we have to find methods that really work for our department. I wanted to, by way of bringing this webinar to a close before we take some questions, I wanted to just share with you, the Andy Warhol 10 minutes of fame. They always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself. And I think that that's really so true. So if you're in a department right now that is adopting a, wait and see, let's see how things work out, I would be a little bit more proactive than that. I would go back and think about how clear is our vision, to what extent have we really defined our methodology with CAATs in it, how clearly have we defined roles and responsibilities, how clearly have we defined what good looks like. So with that, Lark, I think we have, I tried to leave a couple of minutes for questions and comments, if there are any.
Yeah, we did get a number of questions, especially around Excel. And one person asked, would you consider Excel spreadsheets to be a data analytics tool? And my answer to that question is no. I think when we're talking about data analytics, we're really talking about, ACL and, much more complicated tools than that. And so the person that asked that question, we did receive a number of questions about Excel. So I would say that, when we're talking about data analytics, it's, we're thinking of bigger, more complicated systems. Another question was, can any of the roles that you've talked about through the data analytics change process be combined? This person says, I'm a decision maker and a stakeholder from their perspective.
Well, that is possible that one of the stakeholders can also be the decision maker. That's very true. That's very, very true. That is possible that could happen. And that would make that stakeholder even more motivated, because now they're the ones that are that's approving the decision. So that definitely could happen. And I think you'll find in the larger organizations, the stakeholders might be separate from the decision maker, but no, they could certainly be combined.
Thank you for presenting today. Once again, we had a great audience out there, great presentation, and thank you everybody for attending today.